welcome or welcome back to the Critic-Verse. Today we're going to be talking about Superman and Lois, Season 3, Episode 10, Collision Course. Now, before we get to the review, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to help build the Critic-Verse. And now, on to the video. This episode is once again titled Collision Course, which I believe is a twofold meaning in reference to events during the episode. The first one happened when Sarah and George Jr., after cliche teenage antics, makes questionable teenage decisions. And the second is, I would say, metaphorical, considering Pia and Lois were always headed for a collision course, just for her to escape and for her to get back to Bruno. We start out with a narration from Lois as she gets her final chemo treatment that turns into her bell-ringing speech, and she has her screw cancer moment in the show. They finish restoring Lois's office to its former glory, including her Mannheim board, and Lois wants to talk to Pia to get her to confess for framing Lex, because Lois and Clarke agree that it's not right for them to hide the truth just because Lex Luthor is a monster. Clarke decides he wants to stay behind and have a father-son bonding day with John and Jordan. Next, Lana prepares for a day with the governor while Chrissy is shadowing them as the press. And Sarah is concerned about Chrissy being there, but gets invited to a kegger by George Jr. and forgets all about it. While Chrissy is at Kyle's apartment and complaining about not having enough stories, Kyle brings up that there might be a secret superhero after he found Jordan's left-behind icicles. And Chrissy, already in the know, just gaslights him. Clarke, wanting to bond with the boys, asks them what they want to do today. And considering he asked them, how about we take a trip flying, I don't think he was considering Jonathan too well in mind. But the boys are nonchalant about everything and just tell Clarke that he can plan it and they'll just go along with it, to put no effort in. But Sarah invites John through text and not Jordan to a senior kegger that George Jr. invited her to. And when Jordan questions John on it, he just notes how weird Jordan is around Sarah. Bruno gets Mateo ready to see his mom, giving him some special cufflinks for his suit. And while it seems like such a wholesome moment, you know something's about to go wrong. Jordan is having doubts about ditching Clarke, but John is fine with it and rationalizes it by saying that Clarke cancels on them all the time when he has to do superhero stuff. As Clarke speeds in with tickets to a wrestling match, and John rejects Clarke's plan under the guise of spending time with Candace, well, just Candace and Sarah, they're keeping it low-key, and you can tell Clarke's feelings are hurt. Sam advises against Lois's plan, but you know Lois isn't backing down. Pia and Lois then have a heart-to-heart about Lois's last chemo and her upcoming operation, but then Lois pulls the rug out from under Pia and says she wants her to go on record with her side of the story after they did publish that article on her. And Pia reluctantly agrees. The boys get to the kegger and John and Candace reunite. Jordan goes off to find Sarah and the relationship drama between them just starts up again. He finds her talking to George Jr., and instead of pausing and introducing himself, he sort of just blunts his way into the conversation while George Jr. is telling a story and keeps asking him for context. Probably shouldn't have butted in the first place. And then Sarah shoos him away to get beer, but she's rightfully so to do that. Clarke vents to Sam about the boys brushing him off and then not wanting to spend time with him. But Sam offers a silver lining, saying at least they don't hate him. Lois then reveals they know Bruno and Pia framed Lex Luthor, but Pia warns Lois that she might be bad, but Lex is the worst, and then sends Lois away. After Jordan tries to unsuccessfully get beer, Sarah gives him hers, and then they proceed to have a post-relationship argument that makes them both wish they were never together in the first place. Honestly, the viewers agree sometimes. As John and Candace catch up, John has to omit some parts of what he can tell Candace because she doesn't know that he had to put the volunteer firefighter program on hold because of Jordan's powers. And because obviously she doesn't know Jordan has powers. Just then the cops arrive and everyone takes off. Sarah gets George Jr. out of there in her car, which was a pretty bad decision, and they almost crash when they have a near miss with a deer, but are saved by Jordan. And he just stands there like he wants to be seen, but as soon as they do, he flies off. Kyle arrives at the scene and is told by the sheriff Sarah is getting a DUI. And then George Jr. starts raving about being saved by someone with powers. And Sarah, knowing the secret, gaslights him. Lois has a theory on how to get through to Pia through Mateo. We hear Jordan call out to Clarke back at the farmhouse with fear in his voice. Clarke consoles Jordan and reassures him that he did the right thing until Clarke smells beer and then gets angry that the boys ditched him for a party under the guise of being irresponsible with alcohol. Lois has one last attempt to get through to Pia by using her son against her, asking how would she want Mateo to hear about her past, from her or from others. Sarah apologizes for damaging her mother's reputation with the governor, with whom she'd been spending the whole day with, and having alcohol in her system and getting behind the wheel. Kyle says Sarah isn't telling the full story and tells Lana what he heard from George Jr., and Lana, knowing the secret, gaslights him. Next we see Pia talk to Mateo about the bow tie she gave him, and Mateo reveals Bruno told him everything and that he brought the cure in one of the special cufflinks he gave him, with special instructions for her. Clarke is on the phone with Lois discussing punishment options for the boys when John gets home, and Clarke speeds and takes the keys right out of his hands. When Clarke tries to give John the riot act, John uses an Uno reverse on him and addresses all the times Clarke dropped plans with them, like in season 2 when Jonathan is stuck doing all the chores while Clarke is off training Jordan how to fly. Pia's health changes for the better, or at least from an audience perspective, when you notice the color returns to her face, and she easily takes Lois hostage to escape. While Clarke, trying to contact Lois, hears Kyle arriving, and Kyle wants to talk to Jonathan, thinking he is the one with powers. Meanwhile, Pia is being escorted through the base by Lois, but she doesn't have the access that Pia thinks she has, and Pia actually has to strong-arm her escape. Back at the farm, Kyle keeps pressing the issue while Clarke tries to deny it, but hearing multiple problems around the world that need Superman, he takes off in front of Kyle, revealing the secret to him. Realizing the sounds were false, he then recognizes that Pia must be behind it, only to find out she's escaped, with the final shot of Pia and Bruno reuniting, mirroring Clarke and Lois at the beginning of the episode. Okay, this was a good episode. More upbeat, I guess you could say, compared to last week's episode, and there's also a lot less action as everything gets prepared for Lex Luthor's arrival. The Irons family doesn't make an appearance in this episode, despite being heavily involved in the main plot of the season for the past couple of episodes. The relationship drama between Jordan and Sarah returns after not being existent for practically the whole season, but I get where both sides are coming from in their little argument. A little fun fact, the governor that Lana was showing around previously played Granny Goodness in the final season of Smallville. Also, there is a parallel between Clarke and Lois and Bruno and Peia at the beginning of the episode, with Clarke saying, "You did it," and Lois responding with, "We did it." Then at the end of the episode, after Peia returns to Bruno, Peia says, "You did it," and Bruno responds with, "We did it." Kyle is sent on a tailspin in this episode since everyone he presents his theory to is already in the circle of trust, and they all try to steer Kyle in a different direction. But thankfully now Kyle knows, and they can finally stop lying to him. One that really stood out to me is that this cure has to go bad, because I don't think Bruno wouldn't give this cure to others given what he has experienced with families going through cancer. But let me know what you think. And do you think the apparent cure Bruno has made, what side effects do you think it will have? Let me know what you think about it in the comments. Thanks for joining me in the Critic-Verse. See you next time.